and welcome to this episode of In Conversation With. Today we get a chance to catch up with Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team Chief Operating Officer Rob Thomas. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. How are we going? I imagine you're a busy guy at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It's been a busy, how many weeks is it now? 7-8 weeks or so. Even though we've been in shutdown, there's still plenty going on. So in between the work, there's plenty of jobs I do outside as well. I've got the sort of DIY list from hell, to be honest with you, and I seem to be doing lots of them, but the list gets longer.
I was going to say, it's been a running theme of In Conversation With. We've got not just a team that can build Formula One cars, but people that are rebuilding houses at the moment. So we might be able to start a separate show about that soon enough. But I think out of all the jobs of the people we've spoken to, maybe COO in Formula One, it might be one of the hardest for me to sort of guess all of the potential roles that fall under the scope of what you do. I imagine it's quite hard to give a brief summary, but it'd be great to get an idea of what your normal day-to-day working life might look like.
It is very broad, you're quite right. I mean, if I sort of think about what's the primary thing that keeps me awake at night, really, I look after the part of the company. So when the designers and the aerodynamicists have finished all of their wonderful work coming up with the designs for a car, I got to take that then and actually make sure we do deliver the car to where it is around the world. So everything from that design release point all the way through to delivering to the race team wherever they are in the world is my prime responsibility. All around that, there's lots of other bits and pieces. So making sure we have an organisation that can deliver that probably takes up probably 75% of my time. But also looking ahead. And if I'm being honest with you, that the role's changed over the years. I mean, I've been doing it for quite a few years now. And when I first started, it was a bit narrower. We were trying to do some of the basic foundational stuff. And now, as we've got such a great team in place and it's evolved, it's much more looking towards, I can let them get on with it, I look towards where we're going and make sure that we've got all the right plans in place.
I want to talk a bit about where things started. There's so many of the fans around the world looking at different career opportunities in F1, and you studied, of course, mechanical engineering at Coventry, and I just wonder if you can remember the sort of first sparks and why you were inspired to move in that direction.
I left school at 16 to do an apprenticeship, so I didn't even do A-levels. So I did an apprenticeship, but my dad was always in automotive engineering. He worked for Jaguar, so sort of cars are in my blood from a very young age. So I was kind of inevitably living in Coventry. You seem to move into apprenticeships at one of the big companies, and I was lucky enough to be sponsored and go and do a degree. And I picked mechanical engineering because it's so broad. It touches all different parts of engineering. Because to be honest, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go, and my career's littered with that. so I did my sort of degree and graduated, and then I thought, well, I'm 21 years of age. What do I want to do? And I was looking to do something interesting and challenging. So I thought, tell you what, I'll go and work on oil rigs, and that's what I did. I went and worked on oil rigs for 5 years. 2 of them in Aberdeen in Scotland, and then 3 years living in Holland working for Shell. 2 weeks on rigs, 2 weeks off, and that was interesting, and I did that for 5 years. And again, it was what shall I do next? Because I was working for Shell at the time. You were due to be sent to another country because you were part of the international staff, and I had a choice of going to, I think it was Nigeria or Oman. And I thought, I don't really fancy them at the moment. So I came back to the UK and went back to automotive because the challenge looked interesting. And I went to Rover, and I spent some time there in different operational jobs, project management jobs, and learned all sorts of different skills. And then I got asked, well, do you fancy doing a bit of aerospace? Okay, that sounds challenging. And the key word through all this is challenges. It's looking at things and going, actually, that looks really different and challenging and quite hard, and I quite fancy that. So then I went to aerospace and did some bigger jobs and travelled the world a bit and saw things. And I can't remember how many years, probably 5-6 years doing that. I had another phone call and it said, actually, we've got something else that you might be interested in. What's that? Do you know much about Formula One? Well, I've seen it on the TV. I do watch a bit of it. But yeah, we're looking for sort of aerospace people, automotive people to come into Formula One to bring some new skills in. That sounds interesting. And that's what I did. So I joined, at the time it was Mercedes Ilmor, but became Mercedes High Performance Powertrain as we know it today. I spent 5 years there helping as much as I can to make them into a stronger team. And then after 5 years, I was asked, do you fancy coming and doing the same thing at Brackley? And 10 years ago, I joined Brackley, and here I am. So it's not the traditional route. I mean, when I was younger, if I was being brutally honest, I quite fancied being a pilot.
I was going to say you could let James Allison take you out for a spin if you're that keen, but it depends how brave you're feeling, Rob.
I don't think my heart would take it. I did actually go for a fly with John Owen once in his helicopter, and yeah, I was hanging on with white knuckles then. But yeah, I would have loved that when I was younger, but reality set in, and I've
Keep the feet on the ground now, Rob.
yeah, and I love everything I do now, so I'm very fortunate.
I was going to ask you actually, was there sort of a grand plan to get into Formula One, and that's clearly not the case. One of the things I noticed is that you played rugby at Solihull while you were studying, and it's been a kind of repeated theme from a lot of the people that I've spoken to, is that even outside of the drivers, everyone else in the team seems to have some kind of competitive past, and I wonder if it's something that you've seen has benefited you in your career, and if it's something you still see crop up with your colleagues.
It's definitely there in everybody. So I've worked in lots of industries, and having now been in Formula One, it is quite unique, and that is one of the reasons. You are surrounded by people, and I'm not sure it's the right thing to say, but almost kind of lost souls, because we're never satisfied. You know, there's that sort of drive in everybody to be really good at what they do, and we never get there. And it's a weird thing. I see it characterised in almost everybody I meet, that we work so hard to win, and we put in so much commitment, so many hours to do it, and we work, and we get there, and we probably allow ourselves about 15 minutes to be happy, and then we move on because it's not good enough. Because and it's a trait we all have. We always look at that. Well, we could have done that better. We've won 6 championships, but we're never satisfied with that, because there's so many things we look at that go, actually, we could do much better. Next year, we'll do it better. So it's in all of us, that sort of competitiveness, and it's a personal thing, I think. I think it's within you that you can't rest. You always want to do better and better and better. And I've seen it in all industries, but I think I see it more in Formula One than anywhere else.
Something I asked Toto when I spoke to him was exactly that. I see so rarely people sort of relish the victories, almost even after a championship, is looking to the next goal. Okay, where's the next threat coming from, and how are we going to sort of overcome that? And I wonder, in this period of time, I asked this to Toto, have you had more time to reflect? As you say, I think you celebrate 10 years now, so you've been there throughout this modern history of the Silver Arrows. Is there one moment that stands out from that you've had time to think about and think, wow, that out of all of it, that was really special?
Whoa, what a question, because there's been so many highs, so many lows. I mean, there's probably 2 or 3, so I'm avoiding your answer because it's too hard. But I mean, some of the championships where it was really stacked against us, when there was big regulation change put in front of us, and we were a little bit on the back foot to sort of galvanise the organisation behind that and say, right, let's show them what we could do. Because if you probably remember, there was I forget the year, but the championship when nobody had won over a regulation change. That was a bit special, because we were really there was a single very laser sharp focus on making sure we did that, and seeing the whole team unite and drive was great. So that definitely sticks in my memory. But I think even in the early days, because I joined in 2010 and we just come out of the Brawn year 2009, which was such a special year for the company, and I was at HPP then. But to win the championship when Honda had pulled out, but also 40% of the people had been laid off. So walking in there in 2010 was a very strange experience, because the guys who were there didn't really know how to feel. They'd worked so hard for the championship, but almost every other person had left very quickly. So it was quite fractured, and people really didn't know what to do or where to, even who their boss was even. There was people, I think I report to him, but they'd had to sort of morph to cover the gaps that had happened. Somebody was doing that before, they're not here, so I'll do a bit of that. So you'd go up to talk to somebody and say, so you're a purchasing guy. Yeah, but I also do a bit of this and a bit of this. Really? Oh, no. So taking all of that and saying, how are we going to turn this now into an organisation that is able to fight for championships and multiple championships that we have been, was probably one of the biggest challenges. And it was a tough 3 years, because the foundations just weren't there. What you'd expect, and I'm very fortunate to have worked in different industries, like I say, but coming in, you think, well, there must be a strong foundation of decent process and structure, and there really wasn't. It really wasn't. So we had to put in just enough structure, just enough process to make sure our quality is good enough. And that took a few years because our quality wasn't good enough. We were breaking down too much. That we had the speed, we had the ability to design things quickly, make things quickly, and go again and again and again, and keep the learning cycle going. We didn't have that in place. So all these things needed building up from the bottom. And I'm from being honest, and it sounds a bit cliched, but one of the biggest satisfactions for me through this has been seeing the people who've been there from the start actually grow and develop and get the reward I think they deserve, because they've put so much into it, and they've become better managers, better machinists, better laminators, better all round, and overlaying on top of that the values and the behaviours that we talk about a lot and are so proud of. You just see the satisfaction in them, and that is, you get a lot from that. Seeing how other people have worked hard and got the results they deserve is very satisfying for me.
I think one of the things, it's easy from a fan point of view to think about Formula One is it's kind of the perfect race car. But I guess from your side, in many ways, it's an eternal compromise, because you'd like to be able to test components for longer. You'd like to make them stronger, which makes them heavier. You'd like to make... how do we manage that? How do you manage that to make all of the different departments that are trying to build the same car, but in many ways all want different things to optimise what they're doing?
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? It is a real challenge. I mean, coming from, say, automotive and aerospace, it took sort of 4 or 5 years to develop a car in automotive, and aerospace took almost a lifetime to get a plane designed. And then you come into Formula One and we do it in about 9 months. So it is a strange thing to get your head around initially, because you think, well, how can you do this? But you really can, and it all depends on having just enough of everything, so just enough process. Because people make mistakes, and we rely massively on the people. So how do we protect the people from making a mistake? Well, you need just enough control. We can't go all the way towards what you do in, say, normal automotive, because we'll be too slow. And as you say, these are the trade-offs. To talk about the cycle of designing a new car, we sort of sit down in the summer with the senior guys like James and John Owen and people, and we talk about what's the sort of overall principle we want to do for next year's car. And from that, we define some of the key milestones we want to achieve. So we know we're going to go to winter testing, but when do we need the first chassis? When are we going to go and test some of the major elements on them? And we come up with a key milestone plan. And from that, we turn it into a really sort of detailed plan. I always call it the Gantt chart from hell, because it really is. It's like 40,000 lines and that tells you almost everything from each sort of aerodynamic release through to design, to manufacturing, to test, to build, all the way through. And that's almost the Bible we follow throughout the winter. And it is, and we always kind of say to ourselves, and it's not sort of written down, but we create this plan, all the areas buy it off, yep, we like that plan, that's fine, we're going to go with it. And if we stick to somewhere like 70 to 80% of hitting that plan, we've kind of done okay. Because things happen, for all the reasons you say, because things are always a compromise. We can make the car sort of really reliable, but we'll make it heavy, we'll make it slow. So what's the balance? And we rely on the judgment of people to do that. And sometimes we get it slightly wrong, sometimes we get it right. But like I said about 5 minutes ago, we're never satisfied with it. So if we'll design something and we'll make it and we'll test it, and it will last for, 10,000 kilometres, that's too much. So let's take a bit off it. So everything is always being looked at to sort of optimise and hone. And in there, of course, we can't forget, we've got to hit a sort of budget as well. So we've got to make sure that the finances all sort of work. So it is a real challenge. But what we have now is such a strong, well-oiled machine in the factory that people just know what they're doing. And initially, I had to do a lot more kind of hands-on helping. And now I can step away because the people that work with me, they are so good at what they do and so experienced and strong, and they manage their team so well that it kind of just happened. But I know how fragile it is. It can flip so easily. So you've always got to keep an eye on it, because it's a living, breathing beast. And if you get it slightly wrong, you'll see it on a Sunday afternoon, and then we'll all feel the pain.
You mentioned earlier, when I asked you to talk about some highlights over the last 10 years, you mentioned it's some of those painful moments that stand out. And I wonder if you can remember the single biggest challenge. I remember there was a certain moment in 2016 where there was a fair amount of work to do between Barcelona and Monaco. But I wonder what stands out to you.
I was going to say exactly that example there. I think the moment, I'm terrible with dates, Danny, but maybe the same occasion when our two cars came together in the first corner. That was probably the same incident, wasn't it? Kind of about that. That was probably the only time where it's kind of you watched it and you kind of froze. you look at it in disbelief, thinking, did that really happen? And then you slip into your operational brain thinking, that's a lot of damage, that is. Oh my God. I remember getting the two cars back, and I think there was well over 1,000 parts that were damaged across the two cars, and we had only, I think, about a week to try and sort that out. So that was one of those moments where you sort of took stock and you thought, "Oh, this is going to be a bit tight." But again, all these things, you turn them around. The team were absolutely fantastic. The amount of commitment and effort people put in, knowing that the freight was going to leave in 7 days, to turn that around was fantastic. So you look at that moment when your heart stops, but then you sort of look back and say, actually, it showed the team at its best. Knowing in adversity, real challenge, and they got it sort of done.
I think for those who are privileged enough to sort of see behind the curtain in Formula One, it's actually, to me, the things that are most impressive are the things that happen to recover from failure. Can you, just going into that in a bit more detail, in terms of a process, I think it would be really interesting to hear. Now, how quickly do you hear back from track? How quickly do the mechanics, Matt Dean, start analysing the parts of the car? How quick do you know back at the factory what you need to start working on? What's the sort of timeline and process you go through on that?
As soon as you see an incident at the circuit, phone calls will start. People will ring each other up, and it used to be a bit of a free-for-all, if I'm being honest with you. It was like you'd ring him and I'd ring my mate and all that. But now it's much more controlled. So the guys, they say Matt Dean, the people at the circuit, as soon as they've got the cars back in the garage, they're starting to try and take stock of it all. And they'll take photographs and they'll take information. And that will be sent to us as soon as possible on the Sunday afternoon, as soon as it's back in. And that gives us at least an indication. Even from the photographs, we'll be able to see that, yeah, that looks like it's not going to be repairable, that could be repaired. And what we definitely get by Sunday night is a very complete list of all the damage on the cars. So it's sent through to a number of people, and here's what it all is. And if it's something really major, we'll be getting orders raised and talking to suppliers even on Sunday evening to make that happen. The real work will kick in on Monday morning then, where everybody gets back in straight away. We'll be together looking at, okay, what's the damage list, and working through, do we have any spares in-house? If not, how quick can we make them? How can we buy them? And the sort of machine will then kick into action. We'll try and get the parts back as quick as we can. And again, it all depends where you are in the world. Australia's a challenge, Silverstone's not too bad. So it all depends where you are. And getting the parts back, again, is the real moment you decide what you can do on it. So it's almost immediate. What we sort of do, and we don't really carry much stock of anything because it changes so often. So we have some spares, but it's just a judgment call. But again, the guys are so experienced in it now, they kind of know what to do. But if I'm being honest, we're always very, very happy when both cars cross the line in good state.
Yeah, for sure. Rob, one of the things in Formula One, we've been hand laying carbon fibre for a long time now, and the sort of, I guess, the way in which the chassis is made has been relatively similar for a long period. I wonder how much of your role includes looking at kind of future processing techniques, new machines, 3D printing. How much of that falls on your shoulders? How much can we rely on Daimler for, I'm assuming they're pretty much groundbreaking when it comes to things like that. How do we analyse what the right direction might be to go is for those areas?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's definitely part of my role, and I put pressure onto the guys who work for me all the time to be looking like that, and I insist that they've got an improvement plan. It sounds very simple, but every year I say to the guys, you must have a plan to get better, and that's in people, that's in process, that's in technology, all these areas. So we generally work our socks off during the winter on the new car. As I said earlier, we're never satisfied with it. We learn some lessons. And we take all that learning from that period and then looking at what's in the big wide world to come up with these improvement plans. And we're doing it all the time. I mean, one of the dangers of being in Formula One, you're in a bit of a bubble. You're in this Formula One sort of environment, and you sometimes you can shut your eyes to what's happening around you in the big wide world. And that's where Daimler is useful. It's so useful for us. And we have, in my opinion anyway, the best of all worlds. It's such a massive organisation, and almost for everything, there's a specialist somewhere. So we can tap into that. So rapid prototyping, as you say, so some of the processes around metal sintering, these sort of things. We've been speaking a lot to Daimler, and they're very happy to share anything they've got with us, because they love Formula One as well. They want to be part of it. So yeah, we push more and more. Chassis is a great example, because we've been making chassis the same way for about 420 years, it feels like to me now. It is a load of guys laying on carbon fibre. We have took some improvements this year in the process for how we do it. But again, it's that balance. We make 4 or 5 chassis a year. You go to an automotive company, they're making 400 or 500 an hour or something. So we haven't got the volume to do it. So the sort of justification to go and invest in some of these technologies just isn't there, because we need that flexibility and speed, and it drives you towards, particularly in composites, a lot of manual work, because there's nothing quicker than that. But it doesn't mean we're blinkered to it, though. And as I say, we've brought some new ways of working in the last 12 months or so, which has made our quality better, it's made our speed better. And we're looking at more and more and more of that. So yeah, it's a requirement. We keep looking, and we're very open to new ideas.
It's incredible, Rob, and I won't give any trade secrets away here, but I was lucky enough on the shop floor. I asked one of the guys, is there a change in weight of the chassis over the season, assuming the chassis stays the same? So there is a bit of a difference, and the figure that was given of the biggest difference between the chassis, considering they're hand built, it is astonishing the work that can be done. Factoring in human error, you think it would be impossible for them to be so close. It's such an impressive part, I think, of the work that's done by the team. We started the conversation with you going to study mechanical engineering, and when I've spoken to some of the other guys, they're kind of hobbyists. Aside from working in the sport, back home they're tinkering with different things as well. I wonder, in your role, sort of overseeing things at the factory and pulling strings in different areas, do you miss at all the sort of the physically working on components at all?
Honestly, yes, I do. And sometimes I have to sneak down and do a bit just to make me feel like I'm adding something to it. I do miss it, and I've been fortunate in my career, but as you go more and more senior, you move further and further away from that sort of hands-on stuff. So, what I have to get my escapes elsewhere. So, where I live, where I'm talking to you now, I'm quite lucky. We have a bit of land, and we have a whole range of different animals. And I could talk to you for hours about our animals, because we seem to inherit them from all around the world. But associated with that is lots of work. So I do lots of physical work around outside of the house, and I enjoy it massively, because my days generally are spent in meetings, mainly in meetings, talking about future stuff like that. So yeah, I do miss it, but I get my fix elsewhere now.
There's other stimulation elsewhere. To wrap up the conversation, I think it makes sense, of course, we talk about the current situation we find ourselves in, and sadly, W11 has yet to sort of turn a wheel in anger, of course, that the terrible situation is happening around the world. But we hope very much that we get to go racing again very, very soon. But to do that, we've got to do so in a safe way. And I imagine in a Formula One factory where everyone's very much a family and working in quite close proximity, that's a role that is taking a bit of thought at the moment.
Yeah, it certainly is. As you say, these are extraordinary times, and we all want to get back racing as soon as we can. We all miss it, but above all else, it needs to be safe, and we need to make sure our people are safe. And as you rightly say, for the last, probably for the last 10 weeks, if not longer, we've had a task force running, looking at how we manage this, and meeting a number of times a week. And our focus now is on the return to work, because we hope that in the week after this, we'll be back in the factory and working towards a race, hopefully in July. So there's lots of things happening at the factory at the moment. We've got people in doing risk assessments in all areas. We're marking up all across the site, the sort of 2 metre distancing everywhere. We're doing one-way systems. We're looking at usage of masks. We're looking at temperature scanning. We're looking at all of these things. And in about 10 days from now, we should have the factory in a really good condition. But we'll make sure as we get back to work, we'll do it in a controlled way. We'll make sure that we don't just everybody piles back in. If people can work from home, they'll continue to work from home. But the guys who can't, who are mainly in manufacturing sort of areas, we'll make sure they're protected and looked after them, because we do want to get on with it. But actually, there's a way to do this, and we'll make sure we do it properly.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody can empathise and understand with it, all of us going through it at the moment. I think for all of us, we look forward to going back racing. Rob, you're not someone we see trackside very often, so it's been really great to get some insights into your career and what happens back at base camp as we get ready to go racing for the 2020 Formula One season. Rob, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.